He always made love sound like sacrifice. Sometimes, he'd say, brushing my hair behind my ear like he was untangling a thought, you have to give something up to prove you're serious about building a life together. And at the time, I believed him. We'd been together 2 years. He wasn't perfect, no one is, but he had this way of making every word feel like it carried weight. He spoke like someone who knew where life was going, and I was just lucky enough to be beside him for the ride. His name was Ryan, 28, charming in a quiet, deliberate way. He wasn't the loudest in the room, but somehow everyone noticed him. He worked in marketing, freelancing mostly, but always talking about bigger things coming soon. I was the one with the stable career, full-time at a mid-sized firm, good pay, decent benefits, the kind of job that made my parents exhale with relief. But Ryan never liked it. He said it made me too stressed, that my boss didn't appreciate me, that I deserved more freedom. At first, it sounded romantic, like he saw something in me no one else did, but slowly I realized that what he wanted wasn't for me to be free. It was for me to be available. He started dropping hints about me quitting. You hate your boss anyway, he'd say over dinner. Imagine what we could do if you weren't tied down. And the thing is, I did hate my boss sometimes. He was sharp, demanding, the kind of man who measured your worth in deadlines and decimal points. But he also taught me things, how to negotiate, how to handle clients, how to fight for my space in a boardroom. Ryan never saw that. To him, the job was just an obstacle. I could take care of us, he said one night, eyes bright with conviction. I've got new opportunities lining up, real ones this time. You could focus on us, on your writing, your art, whatever you've been putting off. He made it sound so simple, like love was a net that would always catch me. I told him I needed time to think. He didn't push, not right away, but in the days that followed, it became the subtext of everything. Every argument circled back to how my job was making me miserable. Every moment I chose work over him became proof that I didn't care enough. It was subtle, so subtle that I didn't even notice how my language changed. I stopped saying I have to work late and started saying I'm sorry. He made my independence sound like betrayal. And when he finally asked again, this time softly, almost lovingly, wouldn't it be nice to just stop? I said yes, because by then saying no felt like choosing something over him. The next week, I handed in my notice. My boss, David, didn't say much, just raised an eyebrow, leaned back in his chair, and asked, are you sure this is what you want? I said yes again, even though my voice didn't sound like mine. He sighed. All right, just don't burn your bridges, Ava. The industry's smaller than you think. That night, Ryan opened a bottle of wine. He said he was proud of me. He said this was the start of our real life together. And for a few weeks, it even felt true. I slept in. I cooked breakfast. I learned how quiet mornings could be when no one was rushing to get out the door. Ryan started coming home earlier, talking about his new project. He said he was helping a startup rebrand, that it was going to open doors for him, for us. He'd kiss me on the forehead and call me his muse, as if my unemployment was now an act of devotion. But beneath all that, something small began to ache. It wasn't about money, not yet. I had savings enough to stay comfortable, but it was about something harder to name, a kind of fading. Like every day, a piece of me was being quietly folded away. He started making decisions without me, little ones at first. What we'd eat, where we'd go, which friends we'd see. He'd brush it off when I noticed. You said you wanted to relax, babe. Let me take care of things. And I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe I was still in control. Until one night, about a month after I quit, I overheard something. He was on the phone, pacing the living room while I was half asleep on the couch. I couldn't make out much, just fragments. Yeah, I'll follow up Monday. She's out now. Timing couldn't be better. Then laughter. Low, confident, calculated. When he saw me stirring, he smiled that same easy smile. Just business stuff, he said. Go back to sleep, I did. But my chest wouldn't stop tightening. It wasn't until days later that things really started to shift. He became distant, distracted. His phone was glued to his hand again. He was suddenly working late. The same words that once triggered his lectures about my priorities. I told myself it was temporary, that he was under pressure, that the new project demanded time. But something in my gut, that small, quiet voice I'd learned to silence, started to scream. The day everything changed was ordinary. That's what makes it so cruel. I'd gone to my old office to drop off my keycard and pick up a few things I'd left behind. A framed photo, a plant I forgot on my last day. David wasn't in, but his assistant waved me in to grab my stuff. As I packed, something caught my eye. A manila folder sitting on his desk, half open, papers spilling out. It wasn't mine, but curiosity, that dangerous reflex, made me glance at the top page. It was a résumé, Ryan's résumé, his name, his photo, his experience, all laid out neatly, like a version of him I didn't recognize. I froze. My brain couldn't even process it at first. My eyes traced the details like they belonged to someone else. Then I saw it, the company name, my company, my boss's department, the same one I had just left. He wasn't helping a startup. He was applying for my job, and suddenly, every late night call, every gentle nudge, every trust me, babe, replayed in my head like a film I'd seen before but missed the plot of. The man I loved hadn't been building a future with me. He'd been positioning himself to replace me. My knees gave out, right there in that office. The violation wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. He'd taken my trust, my livelihood, my future, and used it as a stepping stone. And I realized then that love, in the wrong hands, is just another word for leverage. When I left that office, I couldn't feel my legs. The city outside looked normal. People on lunch breaks, traffic lights changing, conversations humming. But for me, everything had gone silent. The kind of silence that presses against your skull until you forget how to breathe. Ryan's résumé, on my boss's desk, it looped in my mind like a glitch that refused to fix itself. I walked the whole way home without realizing it. My body moved, but my mind was somewhere else, replaying every word, every smile, every promise. By the time I reached our apartment, my hands were shaking. I didn't even take off my coat. I just sat on the couch, clutching my phone, scrolling through our old messages. Like maybe somewhere in there I'd find the missing logic that made it make sense, but there was none. The dots connected themselves, whether I wanted them to or not. The way he pushed me to quit. The timing of his new opportunity. His sudden confidence. His late nights, it wasn't an accident. It was a strategy. That night, I barely slept. I kept picturing him smiling while I typed up my resignation letter. The way he'd kissed my forehead and said, "You're doing the right thing, babe." And I had believed him. God, I had believed him. By morning, I was still stuck between between two realities, the one where I loved him and the one where I couldn't recognize him. He came home from a meeting around noon, cheerful, humming. He dropped his bag, kissed me on the cheek, and asked if I wanted Thai or sushi for lunch. I stared at him, just stared. "Ryan," I said, my voice barely there, "why is your resume on David's desk?" The shift was instant, Roberto, a flicker of confusion, then defense. "What?" "I saw it yesterday. You applied for my job." He blinked once, twice, then laughed, soft and dismissive. "Babe, what are you talking about?" "I told you, I've been helping out with some consulting." "Stop," my voice cracked. "I saw the resume, your photo, your name. You applied for my position." The mask fell. His jaw tightened. His eyes went flat. Then, in a tone so calm it scared me, he said, "You're overreacting. Overreacting." That word felt like a slap. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "It wasn't like that, okay? David mentioned they were looking for someone new. I just threw my hat in. You're not even there anymore, so why are you making it about you?" The audacity of it made my throat close. He wasn't denying it. He was reframing it. Like betrayal was just business, and I was irrational for caring. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation that would make the world stop spinning, but all I could do was whisper, "You told me to quit for us." And he said, "Yeah, well, maybe that wasn't about this job specifically. Maybe you needed a break, Ava. You were miserable there anyway." He said it like he was doing me a favor, and that's when I realized the cruelest part of manipulation. It's not when they lie. It's when they make you doubt your own story. For days after that, I moved like a ghost through the apartment. We barely spoke. He pretended everything was normal, acted like I was moody, like I was the one ruining the peace. And I let him, because I was terrified. I had no job, no income. My savings were thinning faster than I'd planned. Every argument that threatened to push him away came with the same fear. What if he leaves? What happens then? That's how helplessness works. It doesn't come all at once. It creeps in quietly, disguised as reason. I started doing his laundry, cooking his meals, keeping the apartment spotless. Not because I wanted to, but because it gave me some sense of control. Like if I could make everything else perfect, maybe I could fix what was broken. But at night, when he fell asleep beside me, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of his breathing, wondering how someone could sleep so peacefully after doing what he did. The worst part was the gaslighting. Little things. He'd say, I misremembered conversations. He'd claim he told me about potential openings at my company. He even implied that maybe David offered him the chance himself. "Babe, it's business," he'd say, brushing my cheek like I was a child. "Don't make it emotional." But it was emotional. Everything about it was. One afternoon, I checked my email, just habit, muscle memory, and there it was. A company-wide announcement from HR. "We're pleased to welcome Ryan Miller to the Creative Strategy Department." My stomach dropped. He got the job. My job. I read the line over and over until the words blurred. Then I saw the timestamp, sent 2 days ago. He hadn't even told me. When he came home that evening, whistling, I didn't say anything. I just watched him unpack takeout, talking about how things were finally turning around. He didn't even look guilty. He looked satisfied. That's when something inside me cracked. Not loudly, but deeply. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It was about the realization that he never saw me as a partner. I was a stepping stone, a convenience, a placeholder until his own plans aligned. And yet, even knowing that, I couldn't leave. Not yet, because that's the thing about emotional traps. They don't hold you with chains. They hold you with hope. I kept thinking maybe he'd apologize. Maybe he'd realize what he'd done. Maybe the man I loved was still somewhere under the arrogance. But he never did. Instead, he started coming home late again. Now too busy for dinner, too tired for conversations. His phone buzzed constantly. I asked once who it was. He said, "You don't get to question me after the way you've been acting." I remember standing there staring at him, realizing he had flipped the entire story. I was the ungrateful one now. The unstable one. The one who ruined everything. And in that moment, I felt smaller than I ever had in my life. The woman who once handled clients, deadlines, and boardrooms was now afraid to check the balance in her bank account or raise her voice in her own home. That night, I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes looked hollow, her shoulders tense. She looked like someone who'd forgotten how to exist without permission. I pressed my palms against the sink and whispered, "You did this for love." But it didn't sound like love anymore. It sounded like surrender. It started with a noise, something small, insignificant. His phone buzzing on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower. Normally, I wouldn't have even looked. But after everything, after watching him steal the life I built, the sound felt like a pulse I couldn't ignore. One buzz, then another, 3 in a row. I told myself not to touch it, that I was better than that. That snooping would make me the villain in his story. But villains don't exist in silence. They're made in moments like this, and when truth demands to be found. The screen lit up. Sophie, HR. My breath caught. HR. The same HR that had emailed the whole company about his new job. The preview line said, "I sent the draft for your statement. Please confirm if you're comfortable with this wording." Statement? Something in me shifted from pain to focus. I picked up the phone and scrolled up, my pulse pounding in my ears. The thread was longer than I expected, weeks long. Their messages weren't flirtatious, not in the obvious way, but they were familiar, easy, like two people who'd been talking long before that hiring announcement. And then I saw it, a message from her, dated a month before I quit. "Sophie, if she's still planning to resign, that'll make onboarding a lot smoother. I'll handle the paperwork quietly, Ryan." Perfect. I'll convince her to hand in her notice by next week. Don't loop David in yet. I froze. There it was, proof. He hadn't just applied for my job. He'd coordinated it. He worked with HR to make sure I left smoothly, to clear the path for him. I felt my knees buckle. I gripped the counter just to stay upright right. Every memory, every "you deserve rest," every "trust me" suddenly had a script behind it, and he'd written it. I scrolled more messages, more logistics, even jokes about how awkward it would be once he was in the office. But the one that gutted me came from him. "Ryan, she'll be fine. She always lands on her feet. Besides, this company needs someone who can actually deliver. She'll be fine." He spoke about me like I was a temporary inconvenience. I didn't even cry. I just stood there staring at the screen, feeling something hollow expand inside me. When the shower stopped, I put the phone down exactly where it was and walked to the balcony. I needed air. The city felt colder than usual, sharper. I looked down at the street, people moving like nothing was wrong, like betrayal wasn't happening in 1,000 apartments just like this one. When he came out, towel around his waist, he looked at me and smiled. That same easy, practiced smile. "You okay?" And for the first time, I saw how rehearsed it was. "I'm fine," I said, matching his tone. Because discovery isn't just about finding the truth. It's about learning to perform while you hold it. For days, I pretended nothing changed. I made breakfast. I laughed when he told stories. I even asked about his new job. Meanwhile, I started my own quiet investigation. I called Emma, my old coworker, the one I used to have coffee with before I left. I told her I was just catching up. We talked for a while before I finally said it. "So, how's Ryan fitting in?" There was a pause. Then she said softly, "Ava, are you sure you want to know?" That's when I knew. She sighed. "He told everyone you recommended him, that you left so he could take over the role because it was better for the team dynamic. David even mentioned how mature it was of you to step aside." My stomach twisted. He rewrote my exit, my name, my story. He made me the supporting character in his rise. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. That night, I went through the apartment, drawers, shelves, his desk. I wasn't looking for anything specific, but part of me needed to see how deep it went. In the bottom drawer, I found a folder. Inside were printed copies of my old work proposals, the ones I'd written before leaving. My designs, my strategy notes, my presentation outlines, every one of them had his initials scribbled in the corner. He'd taken them, claimed them. I flipped through page after page, seeing months of my effort turned into proof of his skills. The kind of theft you can't report to the police, because it doesn't involve breaking in. It involves breaking trust. And the cruelest part? He probably didn't think he did anything wrong. When he came home that evening, I was sitting at the table with the folder in front of me. He froze. "What's that?" "Your version of my career," I said quietly. He didn't even blink. "You're overreacting again." "Am I?" I opened one of the pages and slid it across the table. "You signed your name over my work." He leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "You're being dramatic. I contributed to those projects too. You didn't. You didn't even know about them until I—" "Stop." His voice sharpened. "You left. I stayed. That's how business works. You don't get to hold on to things you abandoned." That word. Abandoned. He said it with such conviction, like he believed it. Like he'd convinced himself I'd given up willingly. Not because he pushed me to. Something inside me went still. This was the moment clarity stopped being painful. It became powerful. I realized then that he would never apologize, because in his world, he was the hero. He'd built a story where I was unstable, emotional, lazy, and he was the rational one saving our future. And that story would stay intact as long as I kept playing my role. So I stopped. I didn't fight. I didn't cry. I didn't even argue. I just looked him in the eyes and said, "You're right. I did abandon something. But it wasn't my job." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "You'll see." He rolled his eyes and walked away, muttering something about me being dramatic. But I wasn't, because that night, while he slept, I opened my laptop and began writing. Not to HR, not to him, but to every contact I still had in that office. To the people who actually knew my work, who'd seen the long hours, the presentations, the deadlines. I told them everything. Not in anger, but in facts. Dates, timelines, documents attached. I didn't even need to embellish. The truth was enough. When I hit send, I felt something I hadn't in months. Calm, real calm. Not the fragile piece of denial, but the solid, cold calm of a woman who finally stops explaining her pain and starts documenting it. The discovery wasn't just that he betrayed me. It was that I'd stopped recognizing myself because I let him narrate my life for me. That night, as the city went quiet outside, I whispered to myself, "You don't need revenge yet. You just need to be awake." And I was. Justice doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it comes in whispers, in the click of a send button, in the stillness that follows. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched the blue glow of my laptop fade into morning as the city woke up outside. Somewhere, in a dozen inboxes, my emails were waiting, each one written carefully. No emotion, no accusation, just receipts. By 9 a.m., my phone started buzzing. First Emma, then a couple of other colleagues. Then finally, a message from David, my old boss. "Ava, I think we need to talk." I didn't reply immediately. I wanted him to sit with it, to read, to see. Ryan left for work, still half asleep, still smug. He kissed my forehead and said, "Wish me luck, big presentation today." I almost laughed. "Luck's not what you'll need, Ryan." When the door shut behind him, I stood in the quiet apartment and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not sadness, just the slow return of gravity, the weight of myself. By noon, David called again. This time I answered. His voice was tight, cautious. "Ava, I went through what you sent. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." I let him talk. He said HR never disclosed the overlap, that he'd trusted their recommendation, that he thought I had endorsed Ryan's hire. And the thing was, I believed him, because manipulation doesn't just happen to one person. It spreads, convincing everyone around you that the lie is the truth. "I appreciate you telling me," I said calmly. Then he hesitated. "What do you want me to do?" I looked out the window, the sunlight slicing across my coffee cup. "Nothing yet," I said. "Just watch." Because I didn't want a dramatic confrontation. I wanted the truth to unravel naturally, like a thread that can't stop coming loose once it's pulled. And that's exactly what happened. By the next day, HR had temporarily suspended Ryan while they reviewed an internal ethics concern. He didn't know that I knew. Not yet. He came home that night furious and pacing the apartment, muttering about corporate politics and jealous coworkers. He threw threw his jacket on the couch and slammed a cabinet. I've been working my ass off for weeks, and suddenly they're questioning my performance? It's ridiculous. I watched him from the kitchen counter, quiet, almost detached. He ranted for 20 minutes about loyalty, about backstabbers, about how everyone's out to get the good guys. Then he said it. Maybe you could talk to them. You still know David, right? Tell him they're making a mistake. And I almost smiled. The audacity. The same man who stripped me of my job, my dignity, now wanted me to vouch for his integrity. Sure, I said softly. I'll talk to him. He looked relieved, kissed my forehead again, and disappeared into the shower. I waited until I heard the water running, then opened my laptop again. This time, I sent one more email to the company's legal team. I attached the final piece of evidence, the text from Sophie confirming that Ryan had coordinated my resignation with HR. No accusations, just the timestamp. The message was 4 sentences long, polite, neutral, devastating. By the end of the week, HR released a statement. Effective immediately, Ryan Miller will no longer be with the company. They didn't name the reason, but everyone knew. He came home early that day, face pale, jaw locked. They fired me, he said flatly. I didn't react. Just looked up from my tea. Oh? He stared at me. Don't you owe me? You know something about this. Don't you? I met his gaze, calm, unflinching. I know the truth came out. His eyes widened. You don't, I said quietly. Don't insult both of us by pretending you didn't earn this. He stepped closer, voice low. You ruined me. No, I said, standing now. You ruined us. I just stopped covering for it. He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but there was nothing left to say. The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Finally, he grabbed his keys, muttered something I didn't catch, and left. I didn't chase him. I didn't even cry. For the first time in months, the apartment felt like mine again. The next morning, I changed the locks, packed his things neatly in boxes, set them by the door. Then I sat down with my laptop, opened a blank document, and started writing my story. Not the emails, not the evidence, but my version. The emotional truth. The quiet parts that no one ever sees when they read an HR report. Because justice isn't just about exposure. It's about reclamation. Every paragraph I wrote was a piece of myself coming back. The strength. The voice. The woman who had once led meetings and made decisions without apology. She was still there, just buried under layers of manipulation and fear. And she was done being quiet. In the days that followed, small pieces of poetic justice started surfacing. Emma texted me a screenshot from an internal Slack chat. People were talking. They knew what he'd done. Sophie, the HR woman, resigned the same week. Apparently, she'd been offered a settlement in exchange for her silence. And David? He called me one afternoon and said, "We'd love to have you back if you're ready." I didn't say yes. Not immediately, because this time I wasn't running back to fix something. I was choosing what came next. I thanked him, told him I'd think about it. That night, I opened the window and let the city noise flood in. It smelled like rain, like something washing clean. I thought about all the times I doubted myself, all the times I'd apologized for asking questions, all the times I'd swallowed my instincts because someone told me I was overreacting. And then I whispered to myself, never again. It wasn't rage anymore. It was resolve, because the real justice wasn't that he lost his job. It was that I got my power back. He built his success on manipulation. I rebuilt mine on truth, and when truth wins, it doesn't need to shout. It just stands, quiet and unshakable, until everything false collapses around it. That's what happened. Weeks later, I saw his name pop up on LinkedIn, seeking new opportunities. No fancy title, no references, just a man with a blank future. I didn't click on it. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile, because justice, when it's real, doesn't taste like revenge. It tastes like peace. And peace was finally something I could afford again. The first week after he left felt strange. The apartment was too quiet. No music in the mornings, no smell of his cologne, no half-drunk coffee cups scattered on the counter. Just stillness. It was the kind of silence that made you aware of your own heartbeat. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. I'd spent so long reacting to him, his moods, his lies, his shifts in tone, that when he was finally gone, my body didn't know how to not brace for impact. I'd wake up in the middle of the night expecting to hear his keys in the door, his voice calling my name, but all I'd hear was the hum of the refrigerator. Sometimes the absence of chaos feels heavier than chaos itself, but slowly, life began to take shape again. I cleaned. Not just the surface, I went deep. Drawers, closets, cabinets, every corner he'd touched. I threw out the mug he always used, the hoodie he forgot on the couch, even the sheets we'd bought together. It wasn't anger, it was purification. Each item that hit the trash felt like one less string tying me to the version of myself that had tolerated so much just to keep peace. When I finished, I opened the windows and let the air in. The city outside sounded different now. Not hostile, not fast, just alive. I started walking again. Every evening, I'd leave my phone at home and wander. Down streets I'd once rushed through, past cafes I'd never noticed. The first few walks were aimless. Then they started to feel like healing. There's something about being alone in a crowd that reminds you you're part of something bigger. That your pain, no matter how consuming, isn't the whole story. One night, I stopped at a park bench, sat down, and realized for the first time in months, no one was waiting for me to come home. No one was timing me. No one was tracking my choices. That kind of freedom feels terrifying before it feels sacred. A few days later, David called again. "The offer still stands," he said. "The team misses you." I told him I appreciated it, but I wasn't ready to come back yet. He didn't push. "Whenever you are," he said, "we'll be here." When we hung up, I felt something unexpected. Gratitude not for the job, but for the space to decide. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't making decisions out of fear or guilt. I was making them out of choice. I started freelancing again, taking small projects, nothing heavy, designing quietly from my living room. Each project felt like a brick, rebuilding the foundation of who I was before him. Independent, capable, enough. But healing isn't linear. Some days I felt powerful. Other days I missed him, or maybe just the idea of him, the version I fell in love with. The one who said he wanted to build a future with me. It's strange, mourning someone who's still alive. There were nights I'd scroll through old photos, trying to see when exactly he changed, or when I stopped noticing. But love like that doesn't vanish overnight. It dissolves slowly, leaving pieces behind. behind. So instead of fighting it, I started writing it out, page after page, letters I'd never send, questions he'd never answer. It wasn't about closure. It was about giving shape to something that had lived too long as chaos inside me. And then something beautiful happened. People started reaching out. Emma invited me for coffee. We talked for hours, not about work, but about everything else. Her laugh felt like sunlight. She told me everyone at the office knew the truth now, that David had even brought in new HR oversight to make sure nothing like that ever happened again. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt clean. There's a kind of peace in knowing you didn't have to scream to be believed. The truth spoke loud enough. Weeks turned into months. I moved to a smaller apartment. Mine, fully mine. I bought plants, painted the walls soft gray, and filled the shelves with books instead of photographs. Sometimes I'd wake up and feel the urge to text him, to tell him something funny, something small, but then I'd remember I wasn't his mirror anymore. I didn't need to reflect his world back to him. I was building my own. One morning, while I was watering the plants, a notification popped up on my phone. LinkedIn. Ryan viewed your profile. I stared at it for a moment. Not angry, not scared, just still. Then I smiled, a small, private smile, and hit block. No message, no closure. Just silence, because not every story needs a confrontation. Some just need an ending. That night, I took a walk again. The air was cool, the city lights soft. I passed by the office building where it all began. That glass tower that once held so much fear, so much history. Through the windows, I could see people working late. Someone laughing by the elevator. Someone stirring their coffee. Life, just moving on. And for the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider looking in. I felt free. It wasn't a movie ending. No grand revelation, no speech. Just a quiet woman in a coat, walking home under city lights, finally at peace with her own story. The aftermath of betrayal isn't chaos. It's clarity. It's waking up one day and realizing the version of you that survived deserves to take up space again. And that's exactly what I did. It's strange how life keeps moving even after it's fallen apart. For a while, I thought healing would look like celebration, laughter, freedom, maybe even someone new. But it doesn't. Healing looks like stillness. It sounds like silence. It feels like learning how to live inside your own skin again without apology. It's been 6 months since Ryan left. The funny thing is, sometimes I forget he ever lived here. The apartment doesn't remember him. The walls don't echo his voice anymore. My mornings are mine again. My choices are mine again. And when I make coffee, I make 1 cup. But every now and then, I catch myself tracing back through the story, not to reopen it, but to understand it. Because the truth is, I wasn't just angry at him. I was angry at myself too for not seeing it sooner. For mistaking manipulation for love. For confusing control with care. When you're in something like that, you don't realize how subtly you shrink. You don't wake up one day deciding to disappear. It happens gradually. You stop correcting him. You stop defending yourself. You stop existing in full sentences. You become smaller so that the relationship can stay big. And by the time you realize what you've lost, you're not even sure who you are without the person who took it from you. That's what I had to rebuild. Not my career, not my finances, not even my confidence. Myself, one piece at a time. I started writing again. Not just the letters I never sent, but stories. Real ones. Stories about women who left. Women who found themselves again after being told they were too much. Women who stopped being quiet. At first it felt small, almost self-indulgent. Then something strange happened. People read them. They saw themselves in them. I started getting messages from strangers. Your story sounds like mine. I thought, I was crazy until I heard this. Thank you for putting words to what I couldn't explain. And that's when it clicked. Maybe what happened wasn't just destruction. Maybe it was direction. Sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you doesn't end your story. It begins it. I used to think strength meant not breaking. Now I know real strength is learning how to break gracefully and still rebuild without bitterness. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop needing justice from someone who will never understand what they did. When you realize their apology would never fix it anyway. One evening, I was out walking again. Same route I used to take when everything felt unbearable. The sky was dim, that soft gold blue right before the streetlights come on. I passed the glass building again, my old office. I paused, just for a second. Through the window, I saw a new team working late, laughing, leaning over their desks. And for the first time, I didn't feel that twist in my stomach. No resentment, no nostalgia, just distance, the good kind. I thought about David, about Emma, about how I could probably walk in there tomorrow and be welcomed back. But I didn't want to. That chapter didn't need rewriting. It needed closing. When I kept walking, I felt lighter, like the city was giving me permission to move on. Somewhere along the way, I realized Ryan wasn't the lesson. I was. He didn't create the part of me that trusted blindly. He just found it. And maybe in a way, he forced me to confront it. Because now when someone tells me to trust them, I listen differently. Not with fear, but with awareness. And when someone asks me to shrink, I don't. There's a quote I once read. Sometimes you have to lose yourself to realize you were never lost. You were just buried under someone else's story. That's exactly what it felt like. For a long time, I thought the story ended with him leaving, that justice was the last chapter. But justice was only the middle. Reflection is the end. The soft, quiet realization that peace doesn't come when they lose. It comes when you no longer need them to. Last week, I saw him again, not in person, on a friend's Instagram story. He was at a party holding a drink, smiling. For a moment, my heart stuttered. Not because I missed him, but because I didn't feel anything at all. That's how you know you've healed, when their face no longer pulls you backward. I turned off my phone and went back to writing. Outside, it started to rain. The kind of rain that doesn't crash, it whispers. I opened the window and let the sound fill the room. And I thought, maybe this was what after really means. Not a fairy tale, not revenge, just quiet freedom. I don't know where my life will go next, but I know this. I'll never let anyone convince me to shrink again. I'll never trade my independence for someone else's comfort. I'll never confuse love with ownership, because love isn't about taking turns holding power. It's about standing side by side without needing to control control the other. If someone asked me now what secret changed everything in my life, I'd tell them this. It wasn't the resume on the desk. It wasn't the betrayal. It was the moment I realized I had been begging for the wrong kind of love. And the moment I stopped begging for it, my whole world changed. Some stories don't end with fireworks. They end with a deep breath, a quiet room, and a woman who finally feels safe inside her own life again. And that's where mine ends.